Why on earth would you teach somebody a forehand slice? Because as a really good player, you need the forehand slice primarily as a defensive tool. For instance, when you're being stretched, you're pulled out wide, or when you're being pulled in on a shorter ball and you just can't get there with this type of grip. You also need a forehand slice and or chip basically when you're just having time to block a return, or when somebody blasts an overhead at you and you just want to hit a very defensive bump lob. But you can absolutely also develop the forehand slice as a weapon. For instance, when you play on courts that are really fast with low bounces, I'm thinking of grass, but even really fast hard courts, and or even clay. And with the grass court, we've just seen that with Tatjana Maria and Laura Siegemund. For whatever reason, both Germans, they were very, very successfully throwing their opponents off their rhythm completely, basically driving them nuts because they didn't know how to react to that ball. So how do you hit a forehand slice? You need the continental grip. That's a non-negotiable. So on these types of balls here, bringing my racket back about, I want to say a little bit higher than my shoulder, and then I'm moving my entire arm forward. I'm not just bending my elbow here and I'm doing this. I'm also not hacking down. It's really a control shot. I'm also trying to really extend long toward where I'm hitting the ball. So if I'm going down the line, I'm pointing my racket as long as I can towards my target. When I'm being pulled out wide, it is a complete defensive shot. And as opposed to a regular forehand, my off arm actually on the slice stays out here in front, or when I'm really in trouble, you will actually see it going over to the left here because it helps me balance. Now let's get to the fun part, making the forehand slice into a weapon. This might be a more personal feeling, more subjective feeling, but I feel like I can really, really well manipulate the depth and also the angles. So in addition to having a slightly slower ball with a different spin that doesn't really come up, doesn't travel to you, your opponents might miss it outright because they're mistiming it. And even if they don't miss it right away, they can't be very aggressive on that. And that is, for instance, why Laura Siegemund and Maria Tatjana play such great defense. They buy themselves time. They basically give their opponents the chance to screw it up. So right now I can just work on different depths. Really short. I can outright drop shot, of course. Or I can punch that ball a little deeper. So I get all the options. Keeping that ball really, really low, using a different spin, and throwing my opponents off rhythm. And of course, as I already said before, you have all kinds of variations. So on the wider balls basically at the baseline, I do have the time for a further take back a little bit. But for instance, when I have to chase down a drop shot, literally what I do is I just set my racket here. I'm not taking the racket back. I set my racket here and then I can chip it over. And I do like the slice there because it feels like I can hold the racket and then disguise this a little bit better. On the return, you may have to stretch. Again, you're just setting the racket out here in your continental grip and you're punching the ball back. You always want to remember that as you're striking that ball, your racket face is actually almost neutral and or only very slightly open. If you're making this get here and the racket face is that far open, the ball's going to go up, which obviously would be something that you want if you were to throw up a lob And or, for instance, in doubles, this happens a whole lot of times. You have two players up and the two baseliners, hopefully the second player has moved back because otherwise they're the target. They're just basically getting to these smashes and they're just throwing up lob after lob after lob. There, you want the ball up, so your racket face is a little bit further open. If it's too open, the ball goes very high, not very far. If it's closed a little bit more, the ball is a little more shallow, goes further. So depending on what you want to do with that ball, you got to manipulate your racket face. To my mind, the slice is criminally under-taught, backhand slice, but for sure the forehand slice. And especially at lower levels, if you can master a forehand slice, at the most basic level, you're going to do a whole lot of damage because your opponents are just not used to it. They may mistime it. They just don't know what to do. So let me know down in the comments below what you want to use your forehand slice for in the next sessions that you're out on court.